Grace stood on the front step of the house where she was born, her key hovering an inch from the lock. The November rain was turning to sleet, soaking through her funeral coat, but she barely felt it. She pushed the key forward. It would not turn. She tried again, jiggling it the way she had done for 34 years, the way you do with old locks in old houses. Nothing. The key would not even slide all the way in. Someone had changed the locks. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and checked the time, 4:47 p.m. They had buried their mother at 2 o'clock. The reception had ended at 4. Grace had stayed behind to thank the caterers and collect the leftover flowers, because that is what Grace always did. She handled the details. She cleaned up after everyone else. And while she was doing that, while she was being responsible and thoughtful and good, her older sister Patricia and her brother Michael had driven here, to their mother's house, to the house that was supposed to belong to all three of them, and they had changed every single lock. Grace pressed the doorbell. She could hear it chime inside, the same two-note melody she had heard 10,000 times. No one answered, but she could see a light on in the kitchen. Someone was home. She rang again, holding the button down until her thumb went white. The curtain in the front window twitched. Patricia's face appeared for just a second, blank and cold as a mannequin, and then disappeared. Grace started pounding on the door with the flat of her hand. She did not care who heard. She did not care about the neighbors. Her suitcase sat on the wet pavement behind her, the suitcase she had packed that morning because she had planned to stay in the house for the next week, going through Mum's things, sorting the estate, doing what needed to be done, doing what she always did. But to understand how it came to this, how a family could fracture so completely on the day they buried their mother, you need to go back to the beginning, back to when Grace still believed that love and loyalty were the same thing. Eleanor Mensah died on a Thursday morning in October, 3 weeks before that rain-soaked confrontation on the doorstep. She died in the front bedroom of the terraced house in Peckham, where she had raised her 3 children alone after their father walked out in 1994. Grace had been sleeping on a fold-out chair beside the bed for 16 days straight, ever since the hospice nurse said it was time. Patricia had visited twice in those 16 days, both times for less than an hour, both times spending most of that hour on her phone in the hallway. Michael had come once, stayed for 20 minutes, and left when Eleanor's morphine made her confused and she called him by his father's name. But Grace had been there. Grace had held the basin when Eleanor was sick. Grace had read to her from the old Penguin paperbacks Eleanor loved, Chinua Achebe, Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison. Grace had slept in her work clothes because there was no time to go back to her flat in Lewisham. Grace had watched her mother's breath go from labored to shallow to stillness at 6:23 a.m. on October 19th. The hospice nurse, a tired woman named Fiona with kind eyes, had checked for a pulse, noted the time, and then squeezed Grace's shoulder. "You were a good daughter," she had said. Eleanor would have been proud. Grace had nodded, unable to speak, and then she had done what she always did. She started making the calls. Patricia first, then Michael, then the doctor, the funeral home, the registrar. She sat in that room with Eleanor's body for 3 hours, making lists, organizing, holding it together, while her mother grew cold under the blanket Grace had tucked around her that final night. The 3 Mensah siblings had not been close for years, but the fault lines had always been there. Hairline cracks that widened every time money or responsibility came up. Patricia was the oldest, the one who had left home at 18 and never really come back. She had married a dentist named Colin, moved to a detached house in Dulwich, and cultivated a life that looked nothing like the one she grew up in. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a silver Audi, and spoke about Peckham the way tourists speak about places they visited once and found charming but would never actually stay in. Michael was the middle child and the only son, which had meant something in their Ghanaian father's eyes before he left, and had continued to mean something in Eleanor's eyes even after. He had drifted through his 20s, A year of university, abandoned, a string of sales jobs, none lasting, 2 children with 2 different women, neither relationship surviving. By his 30s, he had settled into a comfortable rhythm of borrowing money from Eleanor and presenting vague business plans that never quite materialized. He lived in a rented flat in Catford and drove a car he could not afford. Grace was the youngest by 7 years, an accident baby born when Eleanor thought she was done with childbearing. Grace had stayed close. She had studied social work at London Met, lived in a modest 1-bedroom flat she could barely afford, and visited Eleanor every Sunday without fail. She brought groceries. She fixed the leaking tap in the kitchen. She repainted the hallway when the old paint started peeling. She was the one Eleanor called when she needed someone, and Grace always came. This was the dynamic. Patricia had escaped, Michael had failed, and Grace had stayed. And now Eleanor was gone, and the house, the modest, narrow, 3-bedroom terraced house, worth approximately £520,000 in the current market, was the only thing left that mattered. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days after Eleanor died, when Grace went to the house to start going through paperwork. She had her own key. She had always had her own key, and she let herself in on the Sunday morning, carrying bin bags and file boxes and a thermos of tea. The house still smelled like Eleanor. Lavender hand soap, the coconut oil she used on her hair, the faint medicinal smell of sickness underneath. Grace stood in the hallway and let herself cry for the first time since Thursday. Then she wiped her face, went into the kitchen, and started opening drawers. Eleanor had been organized in some ways and hopelessly chaotic in others. Her bills were filed neatly in a cabinet by the back door, but her personal papers were scattered everywhere. Birth certificates mixed with old shopping lists, insurance documents stuffed into cookbooks, bank statements from 2003 in a drawer with tea towels. Grace worked methodically, sorting everything into piles. Immediate, important, keep, bin. She was 2 hours in when she found the folder. It was at the back of Eleanor's wardrobe, behind a stack of shoeboxes that still held the receipt-stuffed tissue paper from purchases made decades ago. The folder was dark green, the kind you buy at W.H. Smith, and it was labeled in Eleanor's careful handwriting, "Important, Solicitor." Inside were 8 documents, all clipped together with a rusted paperclip. The first was Eleanor's will, dated April 2022, 18 months ago. Grace sat down on the carpet and read it. The house was to be divided equally among the 3 children, 1/3 to Patricia, 1/3 to Michael, 1/3 to Grace. That was expected, fair. But there was a note paper clipped to the front of the will, handwritten on Eleanor's monogrammed notepaper. It said, "Grace, if you are reading this and I am gone, there is something you need to know. Speak to Marcus Ose at Ose & Partners before you do anything else. Do not tell your brother and sister you have found this. Not yet. Trust me, please." The note was dated 3 weeks before Eleanor died. Grace read the note 4 times. Then she went through the rest of the documents in the folder. Behind the will was a bank statement from Eleanor's savings account at Nationwide, dated September 2023, 1 month before she died. The balance was £1,847. That seemed right. Eleanor had never had much money. She had worked as a teaching assistant for 30 years, retired on a modest pension, and lived carefully. But the next document did not make sense. It was a printout from the same Nationwide account, but dated January 2020, nearly 4 years earlier. The balance then had been £68,320. Grace stared at the number. £68,000. Where had that come from? And more importantly, where had it gone? She flipped through the remaining documents. There was a letter from a probate solicitor dated December 2019, referring to the estate of one James Mensah, Eleanor's late husband, Grace's father. James had died in April 2019, 5 years after walking out, and apparently he had left a small inheritance. The letter confirmed a payment of £70,000 to Eleanor Mensah to be transferred within 6 weeks. So that was where the money had come from. James, who had abandoned them, who had started a new life in Birmingham with a new woman who had never paid consistent child support, had died and left Eleanor £70,000. It was not a fortune, but it was substantial, life-changing even, and Eleanor had never mentioned it, not once. Not to Grace, who had been there every week, not during the long nights when Eleanor worried aloud about money, about the roof that needed work, about the boiler that was on its last legs. Grace kept flipping. The next document was a photocopy of a check dated March 2020. It was made out to Michael Mensa. The amount, £30,000. The memo line, in Eleanor's handwriting, "To help you get started, my love." Grace's hands started to shake. She found another check photocopy. July 2020. Payee, Patricia Mensa Williams. Amount, £25,000. Memo, "For your future, my darling." That was £55,000. Gone. Given away. And Grace, who had been there, who had slept in a fold-out chair and held the basin and read Toni Morrison aloud until her voice went hoarse, Grace had received nothing. Not a word. Not a penny. Not even the knowledge that the money had existed. Grace sat on that bedroom floor for an hour, maybe longer. The house settled and creaked around her the way old houses do. A pipe knocked in the wall. The neighbor's dog barked. Outside, someone was mowing a lawn, even though it was nearly November. She tried to make sense of it. Mum had given Michael £30,000 in March 2020. That was right at the start of the pandemic, when everyone was losing work, when the world felt like it was ending. Michael had told everyone he was starting a business, something to do with property sourcing, connecting buyers with off-market sellers. He had shown Grace a glossy brochure he had printed at Vistaprint. He had seemed for once genuinely excited. Grace had assumed he had secured a loan or found an investor. She had never imagined it was Mum's money. And Patricia, £25,000 in July 2020. What had that been for? Patricia had never mentioned needing money. Patricia had a husband with a dental practice and a house in Dulwich. But Grace tried to remember. July 2020. What had been happening then? And then she remembered. Patricia had started talking about renovating their kitchen that summer. She had shown Grace photographs of marble countertops and brass fixtures, complained about how expensive everything was, how the quote had come in higher than expected. The renovation had been completed by September, so Mum had paid for Patricia's kitchen. Not a gift for survival, not money to keep her afloat, money for marble countertops. Grace felt something harden in her chest, something that had been soft and grieving only an hour ago. She gathered the documents carefully, put them back in the green folder, and left the house. She did not lock the door behind her. She did not care. She walked to the bus stop, rode the P12 to Lewisham, went into her flat, and sat at her kitchen table with the folder in front of her. Then she looked up Marcus Osei, solicitor, on her laptop. His office was in Brixton. She called and made an appointment for Wednesday morning. When the receptionist asked what it was regarding, Grace said, "I need to speak to him about my mother's will." And she did not mention it to Patricia. She did not mention it to Michael. She did exactly what Eleanor's note had told her to do. Marcus Osei's office was above a Caribbean takeaway on Brixton Hill, the kind of place you would walk past without noticing if you were not looking for it. Grace arrived 10 minutes early on Wednesday and sat in the small waiting room that smelled of jerk seasoning from downstairs and old paper. The receptionist, a young woman with pink box braids, offered her tea. Grace accepted and did not drink it. At 10:02, Marcus Osei opened his office door and gestured her inside. He was a neat, careful man in his mid-50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a charcoal suit that looked expensive but not showy. His office was cramped but organized. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk covered with case files, a window overlooking the street. He shook Grace's hand. His grip was firm and warm, and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit," he said, "and I am very sorry for your loss. I knew your mother. She was a good woman." Grace sat. She placed the green folder on his desk. Marcus looked at it and nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting it. "You found the note," he said. It was not a question. Grace nodded. She did not trust herself to speak yet. Marcus opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a file with Eleanor's name on the tab. He opened it and withdrew a single sheet of paper. "Your mother came to see me in September," he said. 6 weeks before she passed. She knew she did not have long. She wanted to make sure you knew the truth before the estate was finalized. He slid the paper across the desk. It was a printout of Eleanor's bank transactions, January 2020 to September 2023. Every deposit, every withdrawal. Grace scanned it. The £70,000 inheritance had come in February 2020. In March, £30,000 had been withdrawn. One transaction, in person at the Peckham branch. Michael. In July, £25,000 had been transferred electronically to an account in Patricia's name. Then over the next 2 years, small withdrawals. £200 here, £500 there, always to Michael. Sometimes the notation said loan, sometimes it just said M. By September 2023, Eleanor had £1,847 left. She had given her son and daughter £55,000 in large payments. And then she had given Michael another £12,000 in small increments over 2 years. £67,000 total. Almost everything. "She kept £1,000 for herself," Grace said quietly. Her voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. "For the woman who raised us." Marcus folded his hands on the desk. "Your mother wanted you to know before probate began," he said. "She was afraid your siblings would not tell you. She was afraid there would be a fight, and she wanted you to be prepared." Grace looked up. "Did she say why she gave them the money?" Marcus hesitated. "Then, she said Michael needed a chance, that he had struggled and she wanted to believe he could build something. And Patricia, your mother said Patricia had always felt like she was owed something, for leaving early, for making her own way. Eleanor felt guilt, Grace, a lot of guilt, about your father leaving, about not being able to give her children more. So when the money came, she gave it away. She thought it would fix something." Grace felt the hardness in her chest spread. "And me?" Marcus met her eyes. "You were the one she trusted to understand, the one who did not need fixing." Grace left Marcus Osei's office with a copy of the transaction records and a sick, hollowed-out feeling in her stomach. She stood on Brixton Hill, the traffic roaring past, the November wind cutting through her coat, and she tried to decide what to do. Confront them? Demand an explanation? Or say nothing? Let the estate proceed, take her 1/3 of the house, and disappear from their lives the way Patricia had disappeared years ago. But the house was worth £520,000, give or take. 1/3 was roughly £173,000. Michael had already received £42,000. Patricia had received £25,000, and Grace had received nothing. If Eleanor had intended the inheritance from their father to be an early distribution, if she had meant for that money to come out of their eventual shares, then Michael and Patricia had already been paid. They owed the estate. But there was nothing in Eleanor's will that said that. Nothing that explained the money or structured the distribution to account for it. As far as the law was concerned, Eleanor had given gifts to her children while she was alive, which was her right. And now her estate, the house, would be divided equally, as if those gifts had never happened. Grace walked to the tube station. She rode the Victoria Line north, changed at Stockwell, got off at Oval, and walked until her feet hurt. She was trying to walk off the rage. It did not work. By the time she got back to her flat in Lewisham, it was nearly dark, and she had made a decision. She would tell them. She would lay it all out, calmly, rationally, and she would ask them to do the right thing, to acknowledge what they had received, to agree to a fair distribution of the estate that accounted for Eleanor's gifts. She would give them a chance to be decent. She called Patricia first. The phone rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Grace did not leave a message. She called Michael. He picked up on the second ring. "Yeah," he said. He sounded distracted, like he was watching TV. Grace kept her voice even. "We need to talk," she said. "About Mum's estate, about some things I found." There was a pause. Then Michael said, "What things?" "Documents," Grace said. "Bank records. I know about the money. Another pause, longer this time. Then Michael's voice changed, went careful and tight. I do not know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, Grace said. Mum gave you £30,000 in 2020, and another 12,000 after that. I have the bank statements. Silence. Then, that was a loan. I am paying it back. No, you are not, Grace said. Mum died with less than £2,000 in her account. You never paid back a penny. Michael's voice went hard. What do you want, Grace? I want us to sit down. Grace said, all three of us. I want to talk about how we divide the estate fairly. There was a sound in the background, a woman's voice asking who was on the phone. Michael covered the receiver, said something Grace could not hear. Then he came back. The estate is divided already, he said. Mum's will is clear. 1/3 each. We will sell the house, split the money, done. That is not fair, Grace said. You and Patricia already got paid. He laughed. It was an ugly sound. You are jealous, he said. That's what this is. You are mad because Mum gave us money and did not give you any. So now you want to punish us. That is not what this is, Grace said. But her voice was shaking now. This is about what is right. Right? Michael said. You want to talk about right? You are the one who is always hanging around, playing the perfect daughter, making the rest of us look bad. Mum felt sorry for you, Grace. That is why she did not give you money. She knew you would just use it as another excuse to stay stuck. And then he hung up. Grace sat on her sofa, staring at her phone, shaking with an anger so total she could not speak. She tried Patricia again. This time, Patricia answered. What is it, Grace? She said. I am in the middle of something. We need to talk, Grace said. I found out about the money Mum gave you. The line went very quiet. Then Patricia said, in a voice like ice, that was a private matter between me and Mum. It has nothing to do with the estate. It has everything to do with the estate, Grace said. You got 25,000, Michael got 42, I got nothing. Now we are supposed to split the house like it never happened? That is what Mum's will says, Patricia said. If you have a problem with it, take it up with the solicitor. But we both know you will not. You do not have the money to fight us in court. And then she hung up too. Grace did not sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversations. Michael's cruelty, Patricia's coldness, the way they had both dismissed her, as if she had no right to ask questions, no right to expect fairness, and underneath the anger was something worse, the creeping realization that Eleanor had known. Eleanor had known her two older children would do this. She had known they would take the money, and then take their share of the house, and feel no guilt, no obligation. That was why she had left the note. That was why she had gone to Marcus Osei and made sure the records were clear. She had been trying to protect Grace, but from what exactly? Grace got up at 5 a.m., made coffee she did not drink, and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop. She started searching. She looked up inheritance law, estate disputes, undue influence, proprietary estoppel. She read about gifts made in contemplation of death, about claims against estates, about sibling litigation that dragged on for years and consumed entire inheritances in legal fees. She found forums where people told stories like hers, the sibling who gave everything and got nothing, the dying parent who played favorites, the family that destroyed itself over money. And then she found something else, a legal term, advancement. It referred to gifts given by a parent to a child during the parent's lifetime, with the intention that the gift would be deducted from that child's share of the estate. In the old days, advancements were presumed. If a father gave his son money to start a business, it was assumed to come out of the son's inheritance. But the law had changed in 1995. Now, advancements had to be explicitly stated in writing. Unless Eleanor had written down, clearly and unambiguously, that the money she gave Michael and Patricia was meant to come out of their shares, the law would treat it as a gift, separate from the estate. Grace searched through the green folder again, looking for anything, a letter, a note, an email printout that said this money is an advancement or this is part of your inheritance. There was nothing. Eleanor had been generous, but she had not been legally precise. And Grace could already hear Patricia's solicitor arguing it. Mrs. Mensah gave gifts to her children during her lifetime, as was her right. Those gifts are separate from the estate. The will clearly states that the house is to be divided equally. There is no basis for a claim. Grace closed the laptop and put her head in her hands. She could fight this. She could hire a solicitor, file a claim, argue that the gifts should be treated as advancements, that the distribution was unfair. But Patricia was right. Grace did not have money for a legal battle. And even if she won, even if a judge agreed with her, it would take years. Years of depositions and hearings and legal fees. Years of not speaking to her brother and sister. Years of turning her mother's death into a spectacle. Or she could let it go. Take her £173,000, buy a small flat somewhere, and never speak to Michael or Patricia again. Walk away, start over, be free of them. But the thought made her sick. Because it was not about the money. It was about the fact that they had taken and felt entitled to keep taking. It was about Michael's cruelty on the phone. It was about Patricia's ice-cold dismissal. It was about the fact that Grace had been the one who stayed, and staying had been taken for granted, assumed, dismissed as pathetic. She thought about Eleanor's note. Do not tell your brother and sister you have found this. Not yet. Not yet. As if Eleanor had known there would be a right time. As if she had foreseen this exact moment. The funeral was set for November 3rd, 2 weeks after Eleanor's death. Grace spent those 2 weeks in a strange, numb state of motion. She went to work. She was a family support worker for Lewisham Council, helping parents navigate the child protection system. And she did her job with the same steady competence she always had. She answered emails, she wrote reports, she sat in meetings and nodded at the right times. And then she went home and planned. She did not call Michael or Patricia. She did not return their calls when they rang to discuss funeral arrangements. She let everything go to voicemail. Patricia left a message saying she had booked a funeral director and a church and a caterer, all without consulting Grace. And if Grace wanted to contribute financially, she could send £400 to cover her share. Grace did not send the money. Michael left a message saying they needed to talk about putting the house on the market, that he had already spoken to an estate agent, that the sooner they sold the better. Grace deleted the message. She went to see Marcus Ose again. She brought all the documents. She asked him, if I wanted to challenge the estate distribution, what would it take? Marcus took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. It would take evidence that your mother intended those gifts to be advancements, he said, or evidence that your siblings exerted undue influence over her, pressured her to give them money she could not afford to give. Do you have that evidence? Grace thought about Michael's gambling debts, the times he had shown up at Eleanor's house with bruises he would not explain, the way Eleanor's voice went tight and worried when she talked about him. She thought about Patricia's coldness, the way she had always made Eleanor feel small, the cutting remarks about the house being run down and embarrassing. But none of that was evidence. It was just family history. No, Grace said, I do not have that. Then your case would be weak, Marcus said gently. You could argue fairness, but family law does not always care about fairness. It cares about what is written down. Grace nodded. She had expected that answer. She thanked Marcus and left. She had one card left to play, and she would play it at the funeral. The funeral was held at St. Giles Church in Camberwell, a red-brick Victorian building Eleanor had attended sporadically over the years. Patricia had arranged everything: the service, the flowers, the hymns, the reception afterward at a function room above a pub in Peckham. Grace arrived early. She wore a simple black dress and Eleanor's silver bracelet, and she sat in the front pew and waited. Patricia arrived with her husband Colin, both of them dressed in expensive funeral wear, Patricia in a black dress with a designer handbag, Colin in a tailored suit. Patricia glanced at Grace, nodded once, and sat at the opposite end of the pew. Michael arrived late, as always, wearing a black suit that looked rented and smelled of cigarette smoke. He sat behind Grace and did not say a word. The service was brief and impersonal. The vicar had met Eleanor only once and mispronounced her last name. A cousin Grace barely knew gave a short eulogy about Eleanor's kindness and her strength. No one mentioned that she had died nearly broke. No one mentioned that her children had not spoken to each other in 2 weeks. Afterward, they carried the coffin out to the churchyard and buried Eleanor beside the plot reserved for James, even though he had abandoned her, even though he had been buried in Birmingham 5 years ago, and this plot was empty and always would be. Grace stood at the graveside and felt nothing. Just cold, just numb, just the weight of the green folder in her handbag. The reception was held in a cramped room that smelled of beer and fried food. There were maybe 40 people, cousins, neighbors, a few of Eleanor's old colleagues from the school where she had worked. Patricia moved through the crowd like a hostess, shaking hands, accepting condolences, playing the role of the devoted eldest daughter. Michael stood by the bar, drinking whiskey, talking too loudly. Grace stayed near the door, and at 3:47 p.m. she saw Patricia and Michael slip out together. She followed them. Grace followed them down the narrow staircase and out into the street. Patricia and Michael walked quickly, not speaking, until they reached Patricia's silver Audi parked on a side road. They stopped beside the car. Grace hung back, standing in a doorway 30 feet away, and listened. "We need to talk about the house," Patricia said. Her voice was low, clipped, all business. Michael nodded. "I already spoke to the estate agent. He said we can list it next week. Probate will take a few months, but we can start the process." "And Grace?" Patricia said. Michael shrugged. "What about her?" "She knows about the money," Patricia said. "She called me. She's going to cause problems." Michael lit a cigarette, exhaled smoke into the cold air. "So let her. She cannot do anything. Mum's will is clear. The house gets split 3 ways. The money we got before does not matter." Patricia frowned. "Are you sure? Because if she fights it, if she drags this into court—" "She will not," Michael said. "She does not have the money. And even if she did, what is she going to argue? That Mum should not have given us money? That we should give it back?" He laughed. "Good luck with that." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We should buy her out. Offer her a lump sum now, before probate. Get her to sign away her share." Michael turned, interested. "How much?" "I do not know," Patricia said. 100,000? Less than her third, but enough that she might take it. "She is broke, Michael. She will take it." Michael considered this. Then he nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, that might work. We offer her cash now, get her to sign a release, and then we split the house between the 2 of us. More for us, less hassle." Patricia nodded. "I will talk to her tonight. At the house. We will make it seem generous. And if she says no?" Michael dropped his cigarette and ground it out with his heel. "Then we freeze her out. Change the locks. Make it clear she is not welcome. She will get her share eventually when probate clears, but she will not get access to the house in the meantime. We will make it as difficult as possible." Patricia smiled. It was a thin, cold smile. "Fine," she said. "Let us do that." Grace stepped back into the doorway, her heart pounding so hard she thought they might hear it. She had heard enough. She knew exactly what they were planning. And she knew exactly what she was going to do. Grace went back to the reception. She stayed for another hour, accepting condolences, thanking people for coming, playing the role of the grieving daughter. At 4:30, Patricia came back inside and walked directly to Grace. "We need to talk," Patricia said. "Tonight, at the house. There are things we need to go through." Grace nodded. "What time?" 7, Patricia said. "Michael will be there too. We will go through Mum's things, figure out what to keep, what to donate." Grace nodded again. "All right," she said. "I will be there." Patricia studied her face for a moment, as if trying to read something there. Then she turned and walked away. Grace left the reception at 5. She went back to her flat in Lewisham, changed out of her funeral clothes, and sat at her kitchen table with the green folder open in front of her. She took out her phone and called Marcus Osei. It was after hours, but he answered. "Grace," he said, "are you all right?" "I need you to do something for me," Grace said. "Tonight, now. I need you to write a letter." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What kind of letter?" "A letter to my brother and sister," Grace said. "On your letterhead, official. I need you to inform them that I am aware of the payments Eleanor made to them in 2020 and after. I need you to state that I am considering legal action to challenge the distribution of the estate on the grounds that those payments should be treated as advancements. I need you to say that I am requesting a full accounting of all financial transactions between Eleanor and her children, and that I am prepared to file a formal claim in probate court if necessary." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Grace, we talked about this. That claim would be very difficult to win." "I know," Grace said, "but they do not know that. I do not need to win. I just need them to think I might." There was a long pause. Then Marcus said, "You want to scare them?" "Yes," Grace said. "I want them to know I am not going away quietly. I want them to know there will be a fight, and I want that letter delivered to both of them tonight, before I meet them at the house. Can you do that?" Another pause. Then, "Yes," Marcus said. "I can do that. Give me their addresses." Grace gave him the addresses. Marcus said he would draft the letter within the hour and have it hand-delivered by a courier service before 7 p.m. Grace thanked him and hung up. Then she packed a small bag, a change of clothes, her laptop, her copies of the bank records, Eleanor's note. She did not know where she was going to stay that night, but she knew it would not be the house in Peckham. And then she waited. Grace arrived at the house in Peckham at 6:55 p.m. It was already dark, the streetlights casting orange pools on the wet pavement. The house looked the same as it always had. Narrow, red brick, the paint on the front door fading. But it did not feel like home anymore. It felt like enemy territory. She walked up to the front door and took out her key. She put it in the lock. It turned smoothly. The door opened. Inside, the lights were on in the kitchen. She could hear voices, Patricia and Michael, talking in low tones. Grace stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and walked down the hallway. Patricia and Michael were standing in the kitchen. Patricia was leaning against the counter, arms crossed. Michael was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone. They both looked up when Grace entered. "Right," Patricia said. "Let us get this done. We need to go through Mum's things and figure out." She stopped. Because Grace had taken out her phone and placed it on the table, screen up. On the screen was a voice recording app. The red recording indicator was blinking. "What is that?" Michael said. Grace looked at him. "Insurance," she said. "I am recording this conversation. So whatever you say to me tonight, just remember, it is on the record." Patricia's face went very still. "You are recording us?" "Yes," Grace said. "And before you ask, it is legal. We are in Mum's house, which technically belongs to all three of us. I am allowed to record." Patricia straightened. "Fine," she said. "Then let me be very clear. We want to make you an offer." Michael leaned back in his chair, watching Grace with narrowed eyes. "We know you are upset about the money Mum gave us," he said. "So we are willing to buy you out, right now, before probate. We will give you £100,000. You sign over your share of the house to us, and we all walk away." Grace did not react. She kept her face completely neutral. "That is generous," Patricia said. "You would get cash immediately. No waiting for probate, no legal fees, no hassle." "And if I say no?" Grace asked. "Then you wait," Michael said. "Probate takes 6 months, maybe more. You will get your share eventually, but in the meantime you do not get access to the house. We have already decided we are changing the locks tomorrow." Grace nodded slowly. "I see," she said. "So this is not really an offer, it is a threat." Patricia's eyes went cold. "Call it what you want, but that is the deal. Take it or leave it." Grace reached into her bag and pulled out 2 envelopes. She placed them on the table. "These were delivered to your homes about 20 minutes ago," she said. "You might want to read them before you make any more threats." Patricia picked up 1 envelope, opened it, and pulled out the letter. Her face changed as she read. Michael grabbed the other envelope and read his copy. His jaw tightened. "This is bullshit," he said. "You cannot prove any of this." "Maybe not," Grace said. "But I can make you prove you are entitled to keep the money. I can drag you into court. I can demand a full financial accounting. I can subpoena your bank records, your emails, everything. And even if I lose, it will take years, and it will cost you a fortune in legal fees. And everyone will know. Everyone will know you took Mum's money and left her with nothing." Patricia crumpled the letter in her fist. "You are bluffing." "Maybe," Grace said. "Or maybe I am just done being the one who gets nothing." She picked up her phone, stopped the recording, and put it back in her pocket. Then she walked out of the kitchen, down the hallway, and out the front door. She did not look back. And the next morning, when she came back with her suitcase, planning to stay in the house while they sorted the estate, her key did not work. Because sometime in the night, Patricia and Michael had changed the locks anyway. Grace stood on that doorstep in the rain, her suitcase behind her, her useless key in her hand, and she understood something she had not fully grasped before. This was not about money. This was about power, about who got to decide, about who mattered. Patricia and Michael had spent their entire adult lives taking from Eleanor. Money, yes, but also time and energy and peace of mind, and they had never once said thank you. They had never once acknowledged what they had been given. And now that Eleanor was gone, they were doing the same thing to Grace. Taking, assuming, dismissing, as if Grace's presence, Grace's care, Grace's years of showing up meant nothing, as if being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who stayed, had earned her not gratitude, but contempt. Grace pulled out her phone, her hands shaking with cold and rage, and she took a photograph of the door, the new lock, the brass glinting in the gray afternoon light. Then she called Marcus Osei. "I need to file an emergency application," she said when he answered. "For what?" Marcus asked. "For an injunction," Grace said. "My siblings have locked me out of the property. They have changed the locks without my consent, without a court order, without any legal basis. I am a joint beneficiary under the will. I have a right to access the property. They cannot exclude me." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you sure you want to do this? Once you file, this becomes a legal battle. It becomes public record. It becomes expensive." "Yes," Grace said, "I am sure." "All right," Marcus said. "I will draft the application tonight. We can file it tomorrow morning. It will take a few days to get a hearing, but in the meantime, document everything. Photograph the locks. Send your siblings a formal written demand for access. If they refuse, that strengthens your case." Grace thanked him and hung up. Then she stood in the rain and looked at the house one more time. The house where she had grown up. The house where Eleanor had raised 3 children alone. The house that was supposed to be Grace's inheritance, her security, her future. And she realized she did not want it anymore. Not like this. Not divided into thirds and sold to strangers and turned into money that would be gone in 5 years. She wanted something else, something bigger. She wanted the truth to come out. She wanted everyone to know what Patricia and Michael had done. She wanted them to be held accountable, not in some abstract legal sense, but in the real, social, reputational sense. She wanted their friends and their neighbors and their family to know. And she wanted to make sure that when this was over, whatever the outcome, she could look at herself in the mirror and know she had fought, that she had not been silent, that she had not let them win. Grace picked up her suitcase, walked back to the bus stop, and started planning. Over the next 3 days, Grace did exactly what Marcus told her to do. She documented everything. She sent a formal letter to Patricia and Michael via recorded delivery, stating that she was a joint beneficiary of the estate and demanding immediate access to the property. She received no reply. She went back to the house twice more and photographed the locked door, the closed curtains, the lights on inside that proved someone was coming and going. On the second visit, a neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, an elderly Polish woman who had lived next door for 30 years, came outside and asked if everything was all right. Grace explained carefully and calmly that her mother had passed away and her siblings had locked her out of the house. Mrs. Kowalski's face darkened. "That is terrible," she said. "Your mother was a good woman. She was always kind to me. Your brother and sister, they never visited. Only you. I remember." Grace asked if Mrs. Kowalski would be willing to provide a statement to that effect, if it came to it. Mrs. Kowalski said yes, absolutely. Grace thanked her and made a note. On the third day, Marcus filed the emergency application for an injunction. The hearing was set for the following Monday, 5 days away. In the meantime, Grace stayed with a friend from work, a woman named Adele, who had a spare room in Deptford. Adele did not ask many questions. She just made tea and gave Grace space. And Grace spent those 5 days doing something she had never done before. She researched her siblings. She went through their social media. She looked at Michael's Facebook page, which was public, and found photographs of expensive meals, new trainers, a weekend trip to Amsterdam. All of this in the 2 years after Eleanor had given him £30,000. She found posts where he complained about being broke, about needing a break, about how hard life was. She screenshot everything. She looked at Patricia's Instagram, which was curated and glossy. Photographs of her renovated kitchen, her new car, her holiday in Portugal. She found a post from August 2020, 2 months after Eleanor had given her £25,000, showing off white marble countertops and the caption, "Finally got my dream kitchen, worth every penny." Grace screenshot that too. And then she did something else. She reached out to Michael's ex-partners, the mothers of his 2 children. She sent careful, respectful messages explaining that she was dealing with their mother's estate and asking if they would be willing to speak to her about Michael's financial history. One of them, a woman named Shanice, replied. She said Michael owed her thousands in child support. She said he had borrowed money from her and never paid it back. She said she would be happy to provide a statement. Grace thanked her and added her to the list. By the time Monday came, Grace had a file 2 inches thick, and she was ready. The hearing was held at the county court at Woolwich, in a small courtroom that smelled of floor polish and old wood. Grace arrived with Marcus Osei. Patricia and Michael arrived with their own solicitor, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Brennan, who wore a navy suit and an expression of professional boredom. The judge was a tired-looking man in his 60s, named Judge Harrington. He listened to both sides present their arguments. Miss Brennan argued that Grace had no automatic right to occupy the property during probate, that the locks had been changed for security reasons, and that Grace was attempting to harass her siblings with baseless legal threats. Marcus argued that Grace was a joint beneficiary with an equitable interest in the property, that she had been unlawfully excluded, and that her siblings had acted in bad faith by changing the locks without notice or consultation. Judge Harrington asked Patricia and Michael directly, "Why did you change the locks?" Patricia answered, her voice smooth and calm. "We were concerned about security, Your Honor. The house was left empty after our mother's death. We wanted to make sure it was secure while probate was underway." Judge Harrington looked at Grace. "Ms. Mensah, were you living in the property at the time of your mother's death?" "No, Your Honor," Grace said, "but I had been staying there regularly to care for my mother during her final illness. I have a key. I intended to continue staying there while we sorted the estate." Judge Harrington made a note. "And you were not consulted about the decision to change the locks?" "No, Your Honor." Judge Harrington looked at Patricia and Michael. "Why was Ms. Mensah not consulted?" There was a pause. Then Michael said, "We did not think it was necessary." Judge Harrington raised his eyebrows. "You did not think it was necessary to inform your co-beneficiary that you were denying her access to the property?" Ms. Brennan interjected smoothly. "Your Honor, this is a family dispute. My clients believe they were acting in the best interests of the estate." Judge Harrington held up a hand. "This is not a family dispute, counsel. This is a property dispute. And Miss Mensah is correct. As a beneficiary under the will, she has an equitable interest in the property. Your clients cannot unilaterally exclude her without a court order." He looked at Marcus. "I am granting your application, Mr. Osei. The respondents are ordered to provide Miss Mensah with a key to the property within 24 hours. If they fail to do so, they will be in contempt of court." Patricia's face went white. Michael leaned over and whispered something to Ms. Brennan. She shook her head. Judge Harrington was not finished. Furthermore, he said, I am ordering that no further changes be made to the property, including locks, security systems, or access arrangements, without the written consent of all three beneficiaries or a further court order. Do you understand? Patricia and Michael nodded. Judge Harrington looked at Grace. Ms. Mensah, I suggest you and your siblings attempt to resolve this matter amicably. If you cannot, you may need to apply for an order for sale or partition. But in the meantime, you have a right to access the property. Grace nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. The hearing ended. Patricia and Michael left without looking at Grace. Marcus squeezed her shoulder. You won, he said. Grace shook her head. Not yet, she said. This is just the beginning. 24 hours later, a courier delivered a new key to Grace's friend's flat in Deptford. It came in a plain envelope with no note. Grace took the key, went back to the house in Peckham, and let herself in. The house was cold and silent. Someone, Patricia probably, had been through and removed a few things. Eleanor's jewelry box was gone from the bedroom, and a small watercolor painting that had hung in the hallway for 30 years was missing. But most of Eleanor's things were still there. Her clothes in the wardrobe, her books on the shelves, her reading glasses on the nightstand. The house still smelled like her. Grace stood in the front bedroom and let herself cry. Not the numb, silent tears of the past few weeks, but the loud, gasping, ugly crying she had been holding back. She cried for Eleanor. She cried for the family they had never really been. She cried for the years she had spent trying to hold them together. And then she stopped crying, wiped her face, and got to work. She spent the next week living in the house alone. She went through every room, every drawer, every box. She found more of Eleanor's papers, letters from James, sent sporadically over the years, full of empty apologies, old photographs of the three children when they were small, before everything went wrong. A journal Eleanor had kept in the year after James left, full of grief and self-recrimination. Grace read it all, and she found one more thing tucked into the back of Eleanor's Bible, a letter addressed to Grace, dated 2 weeks before Eleanor died. My dearest Grace, it began. If you are reading this, I am gone, and I hope you have found the other letter, the one that told you to see Marcus. I hope you have learned the truth about the money. I need you to understand why I gave it to them. I gave Michael the money because I was afraid he would end up in prison, or worse. He owed money to people I did not want to know about. He came to me desperate, and I could not say no. I told myself I was saving him. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was just enabling him, the way I always did. I gave Patricia the money because she asked, and because I wanted her to see me as generous, as someone who could give her something of value. I wanted her to respect me. I know that is weak. I know I should have said no, but I did not. And I gave you nothing, Grace, because you never asked, you never demanded, you just gave. And I took that for granted. I took you for granted. I am so sorry. You deserved better. You deserved the money more than they did. You deserved everything. And I failed you. I cannot fix that now, but I can give you the truth. And I can tell you this. Do not let them take more from you than they already have. Stand up for yourself. Fight if you have to. And know that I loved you most of all. Always. Mum. Grace folded the letter carefully and put it back in the Bible. Then she sat on Eleanor's bed and stared at the wall. And she made a decision. She was not going to sell the house.
Grace called Marcus Osei and told him her decision. I want to apply for an order that the house not be sold, she said. I want to stay in it. I want to buy out Patricia and Michael's shares. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Grace, you do not have that kind of money. The house is worth over £500,000. Even if you only had to buy out 2/3, that is over £300,000. I know, Grace said, but I can get a mortgage. I have a stable job. I can borrow against my third. And if I have to, I will use the threat of the advancement claim as leverage. I will offer them a deal. I will drop the legal challenge if they agree to sell me their shares at a discount. Marcus exhaled. That is risky. They might refuse. Then we go to court, Grace said, and I make sure everyone knows what they did. I will contact the family. I will contact their friends. I will make it public. I will make it loud. They care about their reputations. Patricia especially. She will not want this in the open. Another pause. Then Marcus said, "All right, I will draft a formal offer. But Grace, if they say no, you need to be prepared to follow through." "I know," Grace said. "And I am." She hung up and drafted an email. She sent it to Patricia and to Michael. The subject line was, "Final offer." The body of the email was short. "I am offering to purchase your shares in the property at 10% below market value. In exchange, I will drop all claims regarding the financial gifts made by Mum. This offer is open for 7 days. If you refuse, I will proceed with a full legal challenge, and I will make sure our entire family knows exactly what you took from her. Your choice." She hit send, and then she waited. 3 days passed. No reply. On the 4th day, Michael called. His voice was tight and angry. "You are really going to do this?" he said. "Yes," Grace said. "You are going to screw us out of our inheritance?" "No," Grace said. "I am going to pay you fairly for something you have already been paid for once. There is a difference." Michael was quiet. Then he said, "Patricia wants to fight you. She says you are bluffing." "And you?" Grace asked. "What do you think?" Michael sighed. "I think I am tired," he said. "I think I just want this to be over. So sell me your share," Grace said. "Take the money and walk away." There was a long pause. Then Michael said, "I will think about it," and he hung up. Grace sat in Eleanor's kitchen, in the house that was slowly becoming hers, and she waited. She did not know if Michael would agree. She did not know if Patricia would ever bend. But she knew one thing. She was not backing down. Not anymore. Not ever. And whatever happened next, whether she won the house or lost everything, trying, she would do it on her terms. For the first time in her life, Grace was not the good daughter. She was not the responsible one. She was not the one who stayed quiet and cleaned up and made it easy for everyone else. She was the one who fought back, and that made all the difference. This is where we leave Grace for now, standing in the house where she was born, fighting for something that should have been hers all along, waiting for an answer that may never come. This is a story about family, about the ways love and loyalty get twisted into obligation and exploitation, about the quiet injustice of being the one who stays, and about what happens when the good daughter finally stops being good. If you have ever been the one who gave everything and got nothing, if you have ever watched someone take and never say thank you, if you have ever had to choose between keeping the peace and demanding what is fair, drop a comment below. Tell me, at what moment did you know Grace was done being silent? And if this story pulled you in from the first minute and kept you here until the last, if you felt every twist and every betrayal, hit the like button. Let me know this one landed. Share this with someone who understands what it is like to be overlooked. Someone who has been the Grace in their family. Someone who needs to hear a story like this. And if you want to be here when we come back to Grace's story, because we are coming back, subscribe to Root Diaries. I find one of these every week. Real families, real conflicts, real reckonings. This video presents a dramatized account based on real events. Names, identifying details, and certain specifics have been changed or composited to protect privacy.